During our anniversary dinner, my husband looked me in the eyes and told me, "You are the shadow of my real love." That night, I stayed silent, but what happened next was far from what he expected. If you're watching this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest twists and revelations. And don't forget to leave a comment below telling me where you are watching from. This is the story of how my husband publicly confessed his love for someone else, right in front of me, and how I turned that moment into the sweetest revenge I have ever tasted. The candlelight flickered between us, casting shadows across the polished surface of the restaurant's table. It should have been romantic, the 10th anniversary dinner we had planned for months, the evening meant to celebrate a decade of marriage. But as I watched Julian absent-mindedly swirl his wine, the words he spoke shattered the fragile calm between us. "You know," he said, voice low, "you are a shadow of my real love." I blinked, unsure whether the sting came from the words themselves or the ease with which they slipped from his lips. His eyes never left the glass in his hand, as though he hadn't just crushed something deep inside me. For a moment I considered speaking, asking him what the hell he meant. But the hurt was too raw. Instead, I stayed silent, letting the words hang in the air like a lingering perfume that had already started to sour. Julian, my husband, the man I had sacrificed so much for, still carried her, the ghost of his mistress Serafina, between us. It wasn't the first time I'd sensed it, but this confession felt different, more than a passing obsession. He was consumed by her, as if her absence was the only thing holding him together. The silence stretched longer than necessary, the weight of his confession settling like a heavy fog. I watched him, still avoiding my gaze, his mind elsewhere. The finality of his words pressed down on me, and for the first time in years, I felt invisible. The night continued, the dinner ending in a cold, unspoken truce, a perfect reflection of our marriage. The waiter brought the check, and Julian handed over his card with a practiced smile. As we left, his hand brushed mine briefly, but it wasn't warmth that passed between us, it was a distant reminder of everything we used to be. Later, back at home, Julian did something unexpected. "We should take a break," he said, dropping his coat on the chair. "A few days. You know, clear our heads." His words were so casual, as if this was just another routine, as if he wasn't breaking something that had already been shattered for years. His suggestion felt more like a way to justify the emotional distance between us, not that I needed it clarified. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The break didn't matter. It never would. The next few days, I observed him closely, a subtle shift in my behavior that Julian never seemed to notice. The small things, like how his eyes lingered too long on his phone, how often he was texting someone at odd hours. The unease in my chest gnawed at me, but I pushed it aside, too focused on unraveling the truth. I started sifting through old emails, digging through the archives of our past. What I found didn't surprise me, but it still stung. The messages between Julian and Serafina, hidden beneath layers of professional exchanges, spoke volumes. His obsession with her wasn't a fleeting affair. It was something deeper, something he had never let go. The more I read, the clearer it became. My presence in his life had never truly been enough. I had been a placeholder, a safe choice. A far cry from the woman who had once ignited his soul. A message from Serafina arrived late that night, the words casual but loaded. The email felt like a cold slap in the face. "Hope you're doing well, Julian. We should meet soon. I miss our talks. XX." My heart clenched, but I didn't cry. I didn't feel the urge to scream. No, instead, I sat still, absorbing it all, allowing the weight of my realization to settle over me. Julian had never truly loved me, not in the way I had believed. How many years of loyalty does it take to see the truth? The thought echoed in my mind, the sharp sting of betrayal turning into something colder, more calculated. That night, something in me shifted. The pieces of the puzzle, my marriage, Julian's distance, Serafina's presence, fell into place, and the first spark of revenge flickered to life. I had spent so long building this life around a lie, but now I would tear it down, slowly, methodically. What Julian didn't know was that his biggest mistake was not in choosing her over me, but in thinking I would remain the silent shadow. The glow of the computer screen bathed the room in a cold light. I leaned forward, my fingers hovering over the keys. The soft hum of the machine was the only sound in the otherwise silent office. Julian's words from our anniversary dinner were still echoing in my head, but I ignored them. I had more important things to focus on now. I needed to find the truth, and it was buried somewhere in Aegis Capital's systems. Years of hard work, of pouring my mind into algorithms, structuring the financial empire that was Aegis, and yet all this time, Julian had been playing with fire, careless, reckless, blind. He had let things slip, and I was about to expose him for it. I logged into the company's database, my fingers flying over the keyboard. The doors I unlocked didn't just lead to the inner workings of Aegis. They led to the truth about Julian's incompetence, his hidden collusion with Serafina, and the way he'd let everything slip through his fingers. I started digging, searching through accounts, cross-referencing numbers, pulling up transaction histories. At first, it seemed like just a mess, irregularities in the books, a few transactions that didn't make sense. But as I kept going, a pattern emerged. Small errors that were too consistent to be random. Julian had been more than careless. He'd been blind to the game Serafina was playing, blind to the manipulation that was happening right under his nose. My eyes narrowed as I dug deeper. Julian had made the mistake of thinking that his position at the top was invulnerable. But what he didn't realize was that he had been playing with a bomb the whole time, and the timer was running out. As the numbers on the screen danced in front of me, I couldn't help but remember the late nights I spent in this very office, designing the algorithms that made Aegis Capital one of the most successful financial firms in the world. It had been my brilliance behind the code, my expertise in financial strategy that had gotten them to where they were. Julian, on the other hand, had only ever been the charming face, the man who liked to take credit but never did the work. It was always about the image with him. He didn't care how the company was run, as long as he could play the role of the hero. And now, as I watched his empire begin to unravel on the screen in front of me, I realized something important. The truth about Aegis Capital wasn't about Julian. It was about me. I had been the ghost in the machine, the unseen force that made everything work. And now I was going to make it all collapse. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. The flaws in the system were not just financial, they were personal. Julian had allowed his obsession with Serafina to blind him to his responsibilities. He had put everything, our marriage, the company, his future, at risk because of her. But what he hadn't counted on was me. The thought hit me like a spark in the dark. The Ghost Protocol. It was the name that came to me, as natural as breathing. The plan had already started in motion. Julian's downfall would be slow, but it would be inevitable. Every lie he'd built his life on would collapse, one financial misstep at a time. I needed more. I needed to know exactly how far this had gone, so I called my lawyer. His voice was steady when he confirmed it. Julian had no claim to Aegis's core patents. All the algorithms I had written, all the work I had done over the years. It was mine. Julian had no legal right to any of it. The power was mine now. I was the one who controlled the fate of Aegis. I could destroy him, his reputation, his empire, with a few simple keystrokes. And I would. I put down the phone and sat there for a moment, the gravity of it all sinking in. A small cold smile tugged at my lips. This is just the beginning. I called a friend, someone I trusted, and laid out the plan. I'm going to take him down, I said, the words tasting bitter but satisfying in my mouth, piece by piece. And then I took my first deliberate strike, a small one, barely noticeable, but it would be enough to get the ball rolling. A warning shot. You built this empire on lies. Now I will tear it down. It was only a matter of time before everything Julian had worked for came crashing down, and I would be the one to watch it burn. The first line of code I entered felt like the turning point. A simple keystroke, but it would unravel everything Julian had spent years building. I had activated the Ghost Protocol. Slowly, methodically, the system I designed to make Aegis Capital flourish began to self-destruct. I watched, detached, as the company's stock ticker began its slow slide into oblivion. Each passing second, each plummeting point, was a reminder of just how far I had come. The machine I had built was now my weapon. I didn't need to be at Aegis's headquarters to see the chaos unfold. From the comfort of my home, I monitored the situation, a cold satisfaction creeping up my spine as Julian's empire began to crumble. His desperation, his inability to control the situation, was exactly what I had predicted. But it wasn't just the company's collapse that held my attention, it was Julian's next move. He reached out to Serafina, as I knew he would, his last hope, his idealized savior. Watching him scramble for her, I felt a strange pang of both pity and vindication. He had no idea that the real enemy had never been me. It had always been her. Julian's phone call to Serafina came through late one night. He was frantic, voice shaking. "I need you," he begged. "I've made mistakes, so many mistakes. But I can fix it. We can fix it together. You've always been the one I trusted. I know I'm asking a lot, but I need your help." I listened, hidden in the darkness of my apartment, the words sinking in like poison. His voice was laced with panic, but it didn't stir any sympathy in me. I had long stopped caring about his fragile ego. Serafina, as I expected, played it cool. Her voice, calm and distant, contrasted sharply with his desperation. "Julian, I can't help you fix this," she said, "but I can tell you how it started. You should know." I leaned in closer, my breath caught in my chest. This was the moment Julian would learn the truth. A sharp silence followed before Serafina continued, her words clipped but deliberate. "The flaw in the algorithm. I planted it, Julian. I planted it years ago." I felt the floor beneath me shift. The revelation hit harder than I expected. Julian, the man who thought he controlled everything, had been played by the very woman he had tried to win back. Serafina had never truly left him. She had set the stage for his downfall long before I ever did. Julian's voice broke through my thoughts. "What? You did this?" His words were a mixture of disbelief and anger. "I trusted you." "That was your mistake," Serafina replied, her tone soft but firm. "You never understood the game, Julian. I watched you build your empire thinking it was yours to control, but it was always mine. I've been waiting for this moment." I stood there in the dark, feeling a strange, twisted satisfaction. Julian had fallen into the trap I had set. But what I hadn't counted on was the truth about Serafina, the truth that she had been pulling the strings long before I ever stepped in. From that moment, the media frenzy escalated. Headlines screamed about Aegis's sudden financial instability, the scandal brewing in the business world. The press was now reporting what I had known all along. The company's collapse was not a random event, but a carefully orchestrated plan of sabotage. Watching the stock ticker crash in real time, I couldn't help but wonder, had I gone too far? The guilt I had pushed aside in the name of revenge now crept in, like a shadow I couldn't escape. Sometimes, the truth hurts more than betrayal, I thought to myself, staring at the screen. I had set the stage for his destruction, but now, as the pieces of this intricate game fell into place, I was forced to confront a new truth. My revenge was no longer just about Julian. It was about Serafina, and in the end we were both after the same thing. I had started this to tear Julian down, but in the dark, hidden behind the veil of my vengeance, I began to wonder, who had truly won? The first hint of Julian's desperation came early one morning, as I watched the press conference unfold on my screen. His PR team had drafted the perfect polished statement, drenched in remorse and feigned responsibility. He stood at the podium, a forced humility in his posture, trying to convince the world that Aegis Capital's financial collapse was the result of unforeseen circumstances and temporary misjudgments. It was laughable. He had no idea that the world was already turning its eyes elsewhere. From my office, I watched as his carefully constructed image began to crack. A press release wasn't going to save him. It never would, not now. Not after the house of cards I had carefully dismantled. The more Julian tried to repair the damage, the deeper he buried himself. As the days passed, the media started to pick up on the inconsistencies in his story, the holes in his defense. They wanted answers, and Julian had none to give. Meanwhile, I made sure the leaks kept coming. Each piece of evidence, emails, internal memos, overlooked financial irregularities, found its way into the hands of journalists, feeding the flames of the scandal. The press had already started to buzz about the rumored incompetence at the top of Aegis Capital. It didn't take long before my plans started to gain traction. I met with a journalist who had an eye for business scandals, someone I knew could push the right buttons. In a secluded cafe, I handed over the documents that would turn Julian into a public pariah: tax evasion, illegal trades, and the ultimate betrayal, his disregard for his own company in favor of his obsession with Serafina. The journalist was quick to recognize the potential of the story. "This is huge," he whispered as he scanned the pages, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of discovery. "This will change everything." I smiled coldly. "It's just the beginning." As the articles hit the newsstands, the backlash grew. Investors started pulling out. The first sign that the tremors beneath Aegis were becoming earthquakes. The stock price plummeted, each passing hour a reminder of how little control Julian had over his empire. The weight of his failure bore down on him. And soon, the inevitable happened. Julian called me. "I need your help," he said, his voice tight with panic. "Please, Evelyn, we can fix this together." I felt nothing. Nothing but cold satisfaction as I listened to his desperation. His words felt like a distant echo from someone I had long since stopped caring for. "You're beyond help," I replied, the finality in my voice as sharp as a blade. "You've already destroyed yourself." I could hear the brokenness in his silence before he hung up. But my work wasn't finished. I wasn't done watching him unravel. As Aegis's downfall spiraled, I made sure to tighten the noose. I manipulated key stockholders, convincing them to withdraw their investments, pushing the company further into chaos. The media ate it up. Each new headline another nail in his coffin. Julian's reputation, once so carefully constructed, was now disintegrating in real time. But then, Serafina made her move. I watched in surprise as she issued a public statement distancing herself from Julian. She called him a victim of circumstances and declared that she had no part in the downfall of Aegis. I could almost hear the false sincerity in her voice. She wasn't as innocent as she wanted the world to believe. I stood in front of the broken picture frame on my desk, the one Julian had given me years ago. The glass was cracked, just like everything else, just like our marriage. It was a symbol of all the lies, all the falsehoods we had built our lives upon. You wanted her love. I wanted your soul. The frame, shattered and forsaken, mirrored everything I had set in motion. With Julian's collapse imminent, I found myself walking through the old university campus where Julian and Serafina had first met. The memories of their young love were long gone, but the place still held the ghosts of their past. It was there, on those ivy-covered steps, that their story had begun, and now it was ending. And as the final pieces of Julian's world began to crumble, I couldn't help but feel a strange, hollow satisfaction. I had taken everything from him, his company, his pride, his future, and I had finally made him see who he had always been. But Serafina's betrayal lingered in the background, and I knew now that this was about more than just Julian. The stage was set, and I was the one pulling the strings. The end was near, and it would be perfect. The last few days felt like a long exhale after holding my breath for years. Aegis Capital's stock continued its relentless descent, each point lost a victory in a game I had orchestrated from the shadows. I watched as the once mighty empire that Julian had so carelessly built began to collapse under its own weight. His reputation, which he had spent years crafting like a delicate facade, was now in tatters, and I felt an almost detached satisfaction as I watched his world shatter. I hadn't expected to feel nothing. I had thought there would be some emotional release, some final sense of justice, but instead, I felt only the coldness of triumph. Every decision I made, every small manipulation, had led to this moment. The moment when he would finally face the consequences of his blind ambition and selfishness. The phone buzzed on my desk, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from Julian. The desperation in his words nearly made me laugh. "I need you, Evelyn. Please, we can fix this together. I know I've failed, but you were always the one who understood. You can help me, please." I could picture him, pacing in his office, clutching the phone like a lifeline. His world was crumbling, and all he had left was me, the woman he had used, discarded, and betrayed. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. His fate had already been sealed long before this final plea. As I sat back, the news broke. The regulators were finally moving in. The investigation into Aegis was no longer a whisper in the business world. It was official. Julian's financial mismanagement, his unethical trades, and his negligence were now on full display for the world to see. His arrest was imminent, and the public could sense it. It was only a matter of time before the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, and the media had already begun its feeding frenzy. Meanwhile, I had my own plans in motion. The divorce papers were nearly finalized, ensuring that my financial independence was guaranteed. I had taken care of every detail. A chunk of Aegis's assets, every penny of my due share, would be mine. And with Julian's arrest, the final piece of the puzzle would fall into place. But it wasn't just about him anymore. I needed more, much more. So, I hired a private investigator to gather everything on Serafina. I knew she had been behind much of this, pulling strings, setting things in motion. She hadn't just been an innocent muse for Julian, she was a player in this game, and I was going to expose her for what she truly was. The day I received the investigator's report, I knew it was time for the final confrontation. Julian, now more desperate than ever, arranged one last meeting with Serafina. I couldn't resist. I had to see it. I needed to witness the moment when he realized that the woman he had been obsessed with for years was the one who had set him up for this fall. The meeting was filled with recrimination, accusations, and heartbreak. Julian, once so sure of himself, was a broken man. Serafina, her eyes cold and distant, offered nothing but indifference. I watched from the shadows, relishing the moment when Julian finally understood that he had been nothing more than a pawn in a much bigger game. And then, the final blow. A video leaked online. Julian, in a private moment, breaking down, completely undone by the chaos he had helped create. The video went viral within hours, his face twisted in anguish as his life unraveled before millions of viewers. There was no saving him now. As the media coverage reached a fever pitch, I quietly stepped into full control of Aegis Capital. Julian was no longer the face of the company. He was nothing. I had erased him completely, and the world would soon know it. Then came the confirmation I had been waiting for, Julian's arrest. The headlines screamed of his downfall, the once celebrated CEO now a criminal. The press couldn't get enough. And in the midst of the frenzy, they all started to whisper my name. Evelyn Whitmore, the silent partner behind Aegis's success, the woman who had controlled the rise and the fall. You thought you could control me, I murmured to myself, a small smile playing at the edges of my lips. I controlled you instead. The final piece had fallen into place. Julian had lost everything, his company, his pride, his freedom, and I had gained everything I needed. The day Julian was arrested, the world didn't seem to pause. There was no dramatic fanfare, no stirring music playing in the background, just the stark reality of his downfall. The handcuffs clicking shut around his wrists were a sound that would echo in my mind for years to come. A once mighty man, reduced to nothing more than a criminal, standing on the edge of everything he had destroyed, and I had taken everything from him. His empire, his life's work, was now officially gone, crumbling under the weight of his incompetence, his greed, and my meticulous planning. The press had a field day, publishing every sordid detail. They followed his arrest like vultures, recording every twisted moment of his breakdown. And I, standing at the center of it all, watched with cold satisfaction. He had it coming. But even with all this, Julian still wasn't finished. He reached out to me once more, desperate, broken. The message came late one evening, a final plea for help. His voice, once so commanding and powerful, was now fragile, pleading. I need you, Evelyn, he said, his voice trembling. I've lost everything. You're the only one who can help me fix this. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Please, help me. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence hang between us, the weight of his desperation filling the void. The man who once thought he could control me, The man who had dismissed me as nothing more than a shadow was now begging for my help. But I didn't need to help him. I didn't need anything from him. I called him into a final confrontation, one last meeting. I had planned it carefully, knowing this moment would be the final nail in his coffin. When he walked into the room, there was a visible collapse in his posture. He had once carried himself like a king. Now he was a broken man, barely holding it together. His eyes searched mine, desperate for a lifeline that would never come. "I still love her," he whispered, as if confessing a secret he thought I hadn't already known. "Serafina. I always have, she's the one. The only one who truly understood me." I felt a pang of something, but it wasn't sympathy. It was something darker. I leaned in closer, meeting his eyes with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. "You've always been a fool, Julian," I said softly, savoring the words. "You never loved me. You only ever loved your idealized version of her. You never once looked at me and saw what I gave you. You thought I was just a tool to get you closer to your dream, your obsession." His face twisted with disbelief. "You never loved me? After everything we built together?" I didn't flinch. "No, Julian, I was never in love with you. I was in love with something else. The power you gave me over you. You never even saw it. All these years I kept you close, waiting for the right moment. The truth hung heavy in the air. He had never seen the truth, even when it was staring him in the face. But I wasn't done. And as for Serafina," I continued, "you thought she was your salvation, your muse. But it was never her you were chasing. She set you up from the start, planted the flaw in your code, and I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. I let it all happen." His face paled, his mouth moving but no words coming out. He had no idea what hit him. I watched the realization hit him, slowly, painfully, as the world he thought he controlled collapsed around him. His entire life, all his ambition, reduced to nothing. And then I finished him off. The media frenzy reached its peak as I publicly renounced our marriage, taking full ownership of Aegis in front of the cameras. The reporters hung on my every word as I stood tall, calm, and in control. Evelyn Whitmore, the silent partner, the woman who had been the true architect behind Aegis's success and its ultimate fall. The next day, the press captured the most devastating image of all: Julian, sitting in a prison cell, broken and sobbing. The man who had once stood at the top now reduced to this. The fall from grace was complete, and the world watched as it all unfolded. As I sat in my office, the final legal documents in front of me, I felt the last piece fall into place. The divorce was finalized, my financial independence secured, and Aegis officially mine. Julian had nothing left. He was just a ghost of a man, haunting the ruins of a life he had destroyed. I closed the folder with the final documents, the weight of it all lifting off my shoulders. I don't need your love. I needed your destruction. It was over. I was free. I watched as Serafina's world began to crumble, piece by piece, the same way I had torn down Julian. Her name, once synonymous with artistic brilliance, now became a symbol of betrayal and manipulation. It was my turn to set the stage, and I did it quietly, carefully, like a puppet master pulling strings from behind the curtain. The public was hungry for more, and I fed them exactly what they wanted. I started with a whisper, an anonymous tip that landed in the hands of a reporter who had been circling the story for weeks. The tip contained everything: Serafina's long-standing resentment of Julian, the truth of how she had manipulated him into making decisions that benefited her, and how she had deliberately sabotaged his business for her own gain. The public had been enamored with her bohemian image, her free-spirited aura, but they didn't know the truth. She had always been playing her own game. I knew the moment the news hit, Serafina would be forced to defend herself, and that's exactly what happened. She issued a public statement, calling the accusations false, claiming her love for Julian had always been pure, that she was never involved in the business side of Aegis. But the damage was done. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and the public wasn't buying it. They wanted the truth, and they wanted it now. I watched from my penthouse, my eyes glued to the screen as Serafina appeared on live television, trying to salvage what little dignity she had left. Her calm facade faltered with each question, her answers growing more desperate, more unconvincing. She had always thought she was untouchable. Her art, her allure, her mystique. But I had shattered that illusion. As the days wore on, the media turned on her, devouring her every move. Headlines screamed of betrayal, of hidden agendas, and of a woman who had used her charm to manipulate not just Julian, but the entire public. What had once been a career built on creativity and grace was now reduced to a string of interviews where Serafina tried, and failed, to explain herself. She was a liar, a manipulator, a woman who had used her beauty and her influence to destroy everything in her path. It didn't take long before Serafina's career collapsed under the weight of the revelations. Art galleries canceled her exhibits. Sponsors withdrew their support, and critics who once praised her now publicly denounced her. She was a ghost, a woman who had once been revered, now dragged through the mud, her every move scrutinized. The same media that had adored her was now condemning her, and I stood at the center of it all, watching her fall. But as her name was dragged through the dirt, mine began to rise. The press dubbed me the silent partner, the mastermind behind Aegis's success and its ultimate destruction. I was the woman who had orchestrated it all, the rise, the fall, the revenge. My name became synonymous with power and retribution. Yet, as the media frenzy continued, something unexpected began to gnaw at me. I saw Julian's breakdown in prison on the news, his face haggard, his eyes empty as he sat in his cell, consumed by guilt and regret. I should have felt satisfaction, but instead, all I felt was emptiness. The victory had been mine, but the cost was so much higher than I had imagined. I had destroyed them all, Julian, Serafina, everything they had built. But as I stood alone at the top, the queen of this empire of ruin, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. A close friend, someone I had once trusted, reached out to me, warning me that I had gone too far, that the destruction was consuming me. But I couldn't stop. Not now. I had become the most powerful woman in the game, and there was no turning back. I destroyed them all. But at what cost? As I looked at the chessboard of my life, with all the pieces in their final places, I realized there was no one left to challenge me. The board was empty. The game was over. And yet, a strange void lingered. A shadow that couldn't be chased away. It wasn't the victory that I had imagined. It was something else. Something darker. I knew the next move was mine, but I didn't know where to go from here. The final confrontation with Serafina was inevitable. It had been building for months, the tension between us thick enough to suffocate. The public had already turned their backs on her, but this would be the moment I sealed my victory. And hers. She walked into the room, the same calculated elegance, the same coldness in her eyes that had once captivated Julian. But now, it only fueled my resolve. I had stripped her of everything. Her career, her reputation, her power. And yet, she still held herself as if she were untouchable. "You think you've won," Serafina said, her voice steady, almost amused. She took a seat across from me, eyes never leaving mine. "But the truth is, you've destroyed yourself in the process." I didn't flinch. The words she spoke were the same lies she'd told herself for years. She had never understood the game I had been playing. She thought it was about Julian. She thought it was about love, about revenge. But it wasn't. It had always been about control. And now I had it all. "You never understood," I replied, leaning forward. "This wasn't about Julian. It was never about him. It was about you. I needed to prove that I was better, that I could do everything you did, only better." Her eyes flickered with surprise, but she quickly masked it, an almost imperceptible twitch of her lip betraying her composure. "So what? This is just a game to you? A way to prove your superiority over me?" I felt a chill run down my spine. She was right. All this time, I had told myself I was seeking justice. Justice for the betrayal, for the lies, for the way they had treated me. But deep down I knew. It had never been about justice. It had always been about proving I was better, proving that I could outsmart them all, outplay them. With one final deliberate move, I spoke the words that would end everything. "You were never the one pulling the strings, Serafina. You were just a pawn, like Julian. But I'm the queen now, and you're finished." I watched her face crumble in that instant, the mask of the poised, untouchable artist shattering. There was nothing left for her now. I had taken it all. Her career, her reputation, and now her dignity. I stood and walked out of the room, leaving her behind, her defeated figure etched in my mind like a fading photograph. Julian, meanwhile, was crumbling under the weight of his own guilt. His emotional breakdown in prison was captured by the press, a raw display of a man who had lost everything. But what surprised me wasn't his breakdown. It was the way I felt. I should have relished it, should have reveled in the sight of him suffering. But all I felt was nothing. Just the hollow ache of a victory I no longer understood. It wasn't long before I officially took over Aegis Capital. I was now the CEO. The company I had once built for Julian was now mine, fully and completely. I had control over everything. The press hailed me as the mastermind, the woman who had orchestrated both Aegis's rise and its inevitable fall. But the accolades rang hollow in my ears. The questions about my motives, about the emotional cost of my revenge, crept into my mind. What had I truly gained from all this? What had I really accomplished? A quiet conversation with my lawyer later that week only deepened the emptiness I was feeling. We discussed the final steps of securing my financial future, the next moves for Aegis. But as we spoke, I realized something that sent a cold wave over me. I had lost myself in this. The woman I had become, the decisions I had made, they were all driven by a need for validation. But now that I had it, I wasn't sure it was worth it. Vengeance was my freedom. But now I am free, and I wonder if I am enough. I had spent so long chasing this moment, the moment where I stood above them all. But now, standing alone at the top, I was consumed by the question I hadn't wanted to face. Was it worth it? Had I destroyed everything for something that would never fill the void inside me? I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the woman who had brought me here. Her face was colder than I remembered, her eyes harder. I had become something I never thought I would, a villain in my own story. And yet, I couldn't stop. As I walked away from the wreckage, from the empire I had built and destroyed, I realized the truth. I had won. But I was no closer to peace than I had been before. The past would always follow me, always haunt me, but for the first time in years I felt the stirrings of something new. A future that was mine, free from the ghosts of Julian and Serafina. And so, I walked away. Finally free. But the question still lingered. Who was I now, after everything was gone? The weight of everything I had done finally hit me like a wave, pulling me under. The empire I had built and destroyed, the lives I had ruined, the people I had betrayed, all of it now seemed like a distant echo, fading into the past. But the consequences, they were still there, lingering like a fog I couldn't shake off. The public, of course, had never stopped scrutinizing me. They couldn't get enough of my story, my rise, my fall, and everything in between. But what they didn't know, what none of them would ever understand, was the cost of what I had done. My name had become synonymous with power, with control, with revenge. They all wanted to know how I had done it. They wanted to know why I had done it. But no one asked about the aftermath. No one questioned the woman behind the headlines, the woman who was left to pick up the pieces of her own soul. I had spent years hiding behind a public persona, playing the role of the woman who could do anything, the woman who always won. But now, as the dust settled and the media frenzy faded, I started to detach. I wasn't that woman anymore. I didn't know who I was anymore. The first step was to meet with Julian one last time. He had been released from prison, his sentence served, but the weight of his past still hung over him. When we sat down together, I saw the same broken man I had once known, but something had shifted. He wasn't the man who had betrayed me, the man who had used me. He was a shadow of that, a man who had lost everything and was now trying to piece together the fragments of his life. I've spent so long trying to fix everything, Evelyn, he said, his voice raw, almost pleading. But the truth is, I don't know where to start anymore. I lost it all, and I don't know how to get it back. I don't know how to fix us. The words stung more than I expected. Us. We were nothing now. I wasn't that woman anymore either. I wasn't looking for reconciliation, for closure. I had moved past him, past everything we had been. You can't fix what's already broken, I said, my voice steady. You lost everything, Julian, not because of me but because of who you are, and I lost myself in this game. The truth was undeniable now. My quest for revenge had never been about justice. It had been about proving I was better than him, better than Serafina. What had I really achieved? What had I gained by destroying everything I had once held dear? Nothing. I cut ties with the lawyer and the advisors who had helped me along the way. They had been tools in my war, but now they were just reminders of the person I had become. I no longer needed them. I no longer needed any of it. The confrontation with Serafina came next. I had already stripped her of everything, but I wasn't done yet. She was in a fragile place now, her career destroyed, her reputation in tatters. But when I saw her, something shifted. She wasn't the woman who had stood over Julian, pulling the strings like she was the puppet master. She was just lost. I never wanted this, she whispered, her voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt him. But I thought. I held up a hand, silencing her. I had taken everything from her, but now, in this moment, I realized something. Forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about me. I forgive you, I said softly. But only because I need to forgive myself. Her eyes widened, but I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked away, not looking back. The media started to lose interest in me. I had become a ghost, a woman who had already won, who had already destroyed. I had no more headlines to feed them. The empire I had built was gone, and so was the woman I had been. I had nothing left to prove. Julian's release from prison marked the final chapter of our story. We had both been destroyed by our own ambition, our own flaws. There was nothing left between us but ghosts. And then, I did what I had been avoiding for so long. I disappeared. I left behind the life I had built on revenge, on pain, and on destruction. I built this empire. Now I tear it down. But will I ever escape myself? As I walked away from everything, the setting sun cast long shadows across the horizon. It was the end of an era, the final fading light of a life I would never return to. I wasn't sure where I was going, but for the first time, I felt free. The world would forget about me, but I would remember. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The weight of everything I had done, the destruction, the manipulation, the games, was gone now. It had taken years, but I had finally untangled myself from the web I had spun. The woman I had been, the woman who thrived on control, on vengeance, on being the queen of the wreckage, was no longer a reflection I recognized. She had served her purpose. Now, it was time for me to walk away from her. The final confrontation with my past wasn't dramatic. There were no apologies, no grand gestures of redemption, just a quiet moment of self-realization. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the woman who had taken everything from Julian, from Serafina, from Aegis. The woman who had burned bridges and broken lives, all in the name of power. I'm done with you, I whispered to my reflection. The words held weight. They weren't just about severing ties with the past, they were about embracing a new identity. I had spent so long hiding behind my carefully constructed persona. Evelyn Whitmore, the mastermind, the vengeful architect of destruction. But that identity had been a mask, a defense mechanism against the world. And now, I was ready to shed it. I packed up my life, piece by piece, the remnants of a world I had built from pain. Aegis, Julian, Serafina, none of it mattered anymore. I didn't need to hold on to any of it. I was starting fresh, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The woman in the mirror was no longer a reflection of revenge, but of someone who had learned to walk away, to forgive, and to finally find peace. In the quiet that followed, I began my new life, one that was free of the chains I had shackled myself with. I didn't have a grand plan, no corporate empire to rebuild, no enemies to destroy. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to just be, no longer defined by my past, no longer chasing the ghosts of Julian or Serafina. The media, which had once been so obsessed with my every move, slowly began to lose interest. I was no longer the headline, no longer the puppet master behind the scenes. The stories of Aegis's rise and fall faded into the background, and in their place, my silence became my most powerful statement. I had no need for their validation anymore. As the years passed, Julian's redemption arc played out quietly in the background, a mere footnote in my story. He had his moment of reckoning, found some semblance of peace, and slowly faded into obscurity. I didn't need to watch it unfold. His journey was his own, just as mine was mine. And then, it happened. The shift. I began to realize that my true legacy would never be written in destruction, but in self-discovery. The person I had fought so hard to become wasn't the person I was meant to be. I had won, yes, but in the process, I had lost myself. Now, I was reclaiming that lost part of me. A small, quiet moment arrived one evening as I stood in the garden of the house I had made my own. The flowers had bloomed, the air was fresh, and for the first time in years I could breathe without the weight of the world on my shoulders. I am free, and it is enough. The thought settled into me like a truth I had never understood until now. I wasn't running away from the past. I was stepping into the future, free of the chains I had forged. I had learned that vengeance was never mine to hold. It had been the key to my freedom. I could walk away now, walk into a new life, a life where I was no longer the villain, no longer the puppet master, just Evelyn. The final scene played out not in a grand public gesture, but in the quiet, simple act of walking away. The sun was setting, the sky painted in hues of gold and lavender. The future was open, a vast canvas waiting to be painted with new dreams, new goals. No more ghosts to chase. And as I walked away from everything that once defined me, I understood one simple truth. I had finally set myself free. I am free, and it is enough.